Hey everyone, it is a new week and time for a new theme. This week we're going to be painting nocturnes or night paintings. So we'll see how it goes. Let's get to it. Let's paint. All right, welcome back everyone. For this first painting of the week, I am at my parents' house. I'm in their front yard and I am looking at this huge red oak tree that has been in my parents' front yard for my whole life, obviously. It's huge. If you were to try to hug this tree, your arms might only get halfway around it or something. So I'm just putting a wash in on the painting, and I'm painting with this really awesome light that I just picked up recently. It's this video light. It's actually a light made for videographers or people doing video work, and it's made by a company called Aperture, and I think it's called the Aperture MC. It's a really fantastic light. So for any of you painters who are looking for a really flexible and useful light for doing paintings under, this light is awesome. It's dimmable from 1%, actually, it dims to 0, obviously, but 1% all the way up to 100%. And it is temperature controllable. So you can go from, I think, something like 64 Kelvin all the way down to 32 Kelvin. So that would be something like closer to candlelight, all the way up past like the coolness of direct sunlight, something that's like really cold light. So you can adjust the color temperature and you can adjust the brightness or intensity of it. And I'm just using a little small rig attachment that I picked up for, I think, $15. It has a double ball head with just a little tension grip in the middle, and the light attaches right onto that. It has the same, I believe it's a 1/4-inch thread, the same, whatever the size thread is on the bottom of cameras when you're putting a tripod mount on the bottom of a camera. It's that same size threading on this light. So I was able to just thread that onto this little small rig double ball head adapter, and the other side of the small rig has a clamp that actually fits perfectly on the top of an Italian steel easel. A lot of landscape painters, I know a lot of you use this same type of easel, these little Italian steel tripod easels. They're really nice easels. The reason I love these easels, and I mentioned it last week, is that these easels allow you to put your painting up at eye level. And if you're doing any kind of painting that is sight size, where you're wanting to paint at the exact same scale as what you are seeing, it's really easy, and you can have your panel right at eye level. So all you have to do is flick your eyes from what you're looking at to your panel, and you can place your panel directly next to the subject of what you're painting. But what I love about this light is that I was able to start the painting off with the light at something like only 4%. And I did that so that I could get the values to this really perfect match of what I was seeing. Because if I have the light up at 100%, it is like extremely bright for this little light. It's a super powerful light. It really packs a punch. And it's way brighter than you would ever need it to get for most night painting situations. It might be really useful to have that extra room of brightness for if you were just using this, say, like in a transitional stage or something like dawn or dusk or something, to where you just need a little extra light so that you don't feel like you're painting in the same lighting effect that you're trying to capture, which is actually a really difficult thing to do. But if you have a different light situation on your painting itself, you're looking into an effect that you're not exactly underneath. Your painting and your setup and your palette is in a different light context. So it's easier to actually see the color of the effect of like dawn or dusk or some kind of twilight situation. But this light is awesome and I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying using it. And through the painting, like I said, I started it out at 4%. And at a certain point, I cranked the light up to be brighter so that once I had the sort of value structure of my painting established, I was able to turn the brightness of the light up so that then I could work out more of the textures and more of the kind of surface details of the painting. So that's a little bit like I'm painting into or out of the effect. But for me, it was just a way to like make sure that I had the values where I wanted them, the brightness of them where I wanted them. And then as I would add that kind of texture and detail in, I would still hold on to those same values. And I'm just working out the drawing and the textural information at that point. So the other thing that I realized is that I started out the block in a little bit lighter than I should have, and then I ended up fighting it for a lot of the painting because I was mixing that background with a mixture that I kind of use pretty frequently, and it's just using ultramarine blue and usually a transparent oxide red of some sort. And you can use a ton of different pigments. I think the one that I currently have on my palette is Gamblin, and like nobody that I know uses this. The pigment that I was using that I fell in love with the transparent oxide red was the Rembrandt transparent oxide red. And that's a fantastic color. It has a pretty dark value out of the tube. So it's really useful for mixing a black. If you're mixing a black with a blue and a really dark orange, like a transparent oxide red, or you could say a brown, those two colors make a pretty flexible black mixture that you can easily warm up or cool down by just adjusting the ratios of those two colors. And then you add white to it and you can get a pretty decent gray. But honestly, there's so many good two-color combos to mix a black. That's not the only one I use. I'll occasionally use the red-green one, like using a quinacridone red mixed with a phthalo green. Actually, Gamblin makes a chromatic black that uses two of their paints to do it, and I believe it's their emerald green, their phthalo emerald, mixed with their quinacridone red. Those two colors mixed together make a really nice black. And you can, again, control the kind of warmth of it or coolness of it. If you think of the green as being a cooler black, you add more of that emerald to it, it'll cool it down a little bit. You add more red, it's going to warm it up. So there's that. Another one that I use a lot when landscape painting is cobalt blue and cadmium orange. If you mix those two together, throw a little titanium white into the mixture, it makes a really flexible gray quickly. And you can, again, warm it up or cool it down by just playing with those two mixtures. So I love those kinds of grays where you can nuance it quickly with just two colors. And I think lots of other painters have go-to gray mixtures that they have two colors that are pretty close complements and make a nice neutral when you mix them together. But anyways, all what I was trying to get at was that I was using that ultramarine blue and transparent oxide red to mix my black, and those two colors mixed together look pretty dark, but in a nocturnal context like this, where I'm trying to get a really rich, dark color, it actually wasn't doing the trick for me. So I ended up having to pull out ivory black and help push that mixture even a little bit darker than what I had it. And so with that ivory black, I was able to actually get that sense of darkness. Also, another thing I didn't really talk about was I'm painting, I don't know what night I painted this, but it was probably only 1 or 2 nights after the new moon. So it was super dark outside. The only light that is actually happening on that tree is from a yard light that is on the other end of the driveway in my parents' front yard here that I'm working at. And that was like the only ambient light that was happening. The sky was super dark. You could see stars up in the sky really easily since it was a clear night and the moon wasn't in the sky. So I really did need to have the painting as dark as I possibly could to get that quality of a really dark sky. It's funny, as I was painting the form of this oak tree, and I kept trying to get that effect of light and form out of the oak tree, I kept fighting to try to actually get the volume of the tree to come out of the painting. And I think one of the reasons is that the bright side of the tree was actually super dark. Like on my palette, the light side of the tree, the color I was mixing up, looked nearly black. And the shadow side didn't look that different. And so on the painting, as I'm trying to make this effect of the bright side of the tree turning around on the cylinder of the tree trunk to the dark side, the transition from where the shadow began and where the light ended was so ambiguous as I was looking at it. It was really hard. So I kept repainting that transition over and over and really trying to figure out how to establish that sense of form on the volume of the trunk. So you'll notice I was fighting with that a lot through the painting. And then I didn't want to jump in trying to paint any of the texture of the tree trunk or the bark on this really old oak tree before I had those values established pretty accurately. So I ended up just kind of avoiding the texture for a long while, and I kept painting that over and over until I started to feel like I was kind of arriving at the volume of the trunk. But honestly, night painting is not easy. It's something that you have to really allow your eyes to adjust to the darker light setting. Don't let the camera fool you as you're looking at this video of the painting happening. It was really dark, and I had my light set at a pretty dark setting. You'll notice as I was painting at times, I was pulling out the flashlight on my iPhone to help just see the mixtures and to see like a little bit of that nuance as I was affecting a mixture to either cool it down or to warm it up. I needed just a little extra light down by my palette. And honestly, I might need to pick up a second one of these little lights to just illuminate the palette so that I have a similar quality of light on the palette as on the painting. Because when I really dim the light down on the painting, the palette that's sitting underneath the painting almost doesn't get enough light to actually see the mixtures very well. So I ended up having to pull out my phone a lot to check mixtures out and see how they were going, and then put it up on the painting to test it, and then make adjustments proportional to what I had seen up on the painting in the correct light context. So it was a fun challenge, but the other thing that was interesting was trying to get the effect of the foliage of the oak tree. So there were some hanging branches. There's this really lovely, gnarly looking branch that kind of just twisted all the way down. That was one of the things that really attracted me to this tree. There's this nub at the top of the painting on the trunk, right in the center near the top, like 1.5 inches down from the top of the composition. That originally was this really low hanging branch that was always hanging over the front yard when I was a kid growing up. But the branches that are coming out of this oak tree are just beautiful. These kind of twisted and gnarly, organic looking branches that are coming out of this really solid tree trunk. That was one of the things that I was really attracted to with this, was getting that sense of the visual contrast between this skinny, twisted branch coming out of the trunk and then just the solidness of the trunk itself. And the trunk has this nice, gentle slope. And right now it's sloping to the right, but it's actually sloping towards the south. So it's probably just over time grown that way because it's catching the southern light as the sun travels through the sky. So the oak tree has naturally leaned in that direction of the sun. The other nice thing about this view at night was all the little leaves or sticks that were on the front lawn. Having this yard light throwing the light at a kind of strong side angle to the grass and the lawn of the front yard, you got all these little highlights and then cast shadows right next to these things on the front yard as you were looking at it. The other thing that's just really attractive to me in the composition was the strong cast shadow of the tree trunk itself traveling to the left side of the composition. It's almost doing a similar thing to what happens when you walk outside on a full moon, and if you're walking under trees and you can see cast shadows of things, and it's just from the light of the full moon. And the difference between the shadow and the actual illuminated ground isn't that dramatic if you just kind of take a wide view of the whole scene that you're standing in. The difference is really subtle, but our eyes pick up on it and exaggerate it a bit. But in this painting, I was trying to stay as true as I possibly could to the values that were in front of me when I had my light set to that 4% brightness. This was a really fun and challenging painting, and I'm really looking forward to doing these nocturnes this week and the challenge of trying to mix paint in a really dark context, painting from life, either outside or inside. I don't know if I'll do any inside paintings, we'll see. But I'm really loving this process of painting outside and trying to make something happen in the moment, in a dark light context, and see what will come of that. So yeah, if you have any questions about this process or anything about painting nocturnes at night, definitely feel free to send me a message. And I'm definitely going to be learning things this week because I haven't really painted that many nocturnes. I've probably only done like 4 or 5 in my entire time of painting, actually going outside and painting at night under light. And usually I was using some kind of little light, like a book light, or actually just finding a light that's outside and setting up underneath a light source that is already there. So I have a lot to learn this week. I'm definitely going outside of my comfort zone a bit. So we'll see what happens this week. I hope you guys have an awesome day. I'll see you all tomorrow. Take it easy. Bye.